and I thought I'd share some musings on 2020, the future of the biopharmaceutical industry, and also just to give you a little background on myself as well as to why my musings might be of even remote relevance. So I've been in the biopharmaceutical industry for about 10 years. I've actually worked in the commercial side for both Pfizer, Merck, and several other pharmaceutical companies. I also actually currently work in the R&D side, so I actually help biotech and pharmaceutical companies translate their research from preclinical into humans. So we actually run human clinical testing for them. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't. Yeah. No. Okay. So I'll try and be a little louder. So basically, I've worked in the commercial side of the pharmaceutical industry, and I've also worked in the clinical development translational medicine side of the industry. So both for Quintiles and Parexel. Quintiles is actually the largest clinical research organization in the world, and Parexel is, I believe, the third largest pharmaceutical. I'm actually the business development director for the West Coast, and I work with a lot of biotechs actually out here, both in San Diego, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. I am also the COO part-time over at Genesian, and I'm a DIY bioenthusiast and a vegan, so I thought that would be of interest. I'll try and go straight into really where we are right now in the pharmaceutical industry. We're at about an $800 billion market size. Now that varies depending on which research agency you're actually getting your information from. IMS, McKinsey, PwC, all have slightly differing figures, but that's approximately right. So that's basically where we are. The big challenge right now, and the challenge that's going to be happening over the next 10 years, is really the patent cliff. Many of you are probably very familiar with the patent cliff, and we're looking at about a 20% loss in the global market for patented prescription pharmaceuticals. So that's about $137 billion. So if you guys have probably seen a lot of the layoffs that have been happening in the pharmaceutical industry, they will continue unless something actually takes over from that patent cliff. And I think there's actually some very interesting technologies that will. This is actually one of the reasons behind the death of the blockbuster. I thought it'd be sort of funny with a little Kanye West humor there. So it's the death of a blockbuster. As we know, the business model's changed for blockbuster. It's actually dying, so has the business model for blockbusters in general, blockbuster medicine. So that means any drugs that have over $1 billion worth of sales. So things are changing. They account at the moment for about 34% of sales, and that's actually predicted to actually decrease over a 10-year period. So this is, I believe, what we are already seeing on the early end in oncology, and we will see throughout the next 10 years, which is really adopting a faster-to-market approach using orphan and fast-track approval designation. So typically it takes about 12 years for a standard new chemical entity to be approved. With orphan status, it can take between 3 to 5 years in some very aggressive models. So there's some biotech companies I'm currently working with that are targeting very, very quick approval times for areas of high unmet need. Pharmaceutical companies are also looking at genotyping and thin slicing. It's a term in the industry which basically means taking a disease, let's say something like schizophrenia, and you slice it up based on genetics. So you actually can go to smaller populations. An orphan disease, by the way, is a disease population in the US of under 200,000. Ultra-orphan is even smaller. Ultra-orphan can be a couple of hundred patients who have usually very, very pressing medical needs. And of course, the main advantage with fast-track status and orphan drug diseases is classification is you get to skip a lot of the very costly trials that are involved in clinical development. So sometimes you can get approval at phase 2, which saves hundreds of millions of dollars in development, which, as you saw from Ben's talk, it was about $1.2 billion at last count to actually develop a drug based on the Tufts research. So this is the opportunity, in fact. So the market is actually predicted to go to 1.3 trillion. So that's a near doubling of the pharmaceutical market. And these are some of the trends that I believe are actually going to be changing the face of the pharmaceutical industry as we know it, and the biopharmaceutical industry in particular. One is new lean business models, the emerging 7, so the E7. We're going past bricks. And then radical biotechnology innovation, of which some of the things we've actually talked about here. So this is just it's actually a bioreactor setup. It's actually a desktop bioreactor setup. So these are some of the things that member labs and amateur scientists are already using and will drive a lot of the innovation that we've seen. We have seen the first DIY-funded biotech, which is called ImmunePath, actually based in Northern California. They were successful in raising money from Peter Thiel, which I'm sure many of you do know. Peter Thiel is one of the original founders of PayPal, as well as one of the first angel founders of Facebook, and Halcyon, I believe, as well. So I think we have some Halcyon guys in the audience as well. So DIY bio startups have really started to become much more mainstream, and they will be more mainstream as time goes on. I think we're going to see the same evolution that we saw from the homebrew computer club. We're going to start seeing a lot more small biotech ventures. Virtual biotechs, that's also a trend which is actually increasing, particularly because of the financial crisis, but it's something that works very well. So I work with a lot of biotech companies both in San Diego and San Francisco who actually have maybe one full-time employee, the CEO. They are venture funded sometimes they're super angel funded, and they actually hire key staff members depending on their needs. So it's a much more fluid model, and they're able to cut sometimes up to 70 to 80% of the cost of development. It's pretty incredible. Massive outsourcing, as you can see there. We won't go into too much of the specifics, but right now the market's about $20 billion. By 2020, we're looking at a massive increase to $70 billion. That's really taking a lot of the R&D that pharma are doing right now out of the pharma companies and biotechs and actually outsourcing them to third-party providers. So that brings a lot more efficiencies, cost efficiencies, and hopefully we can actually do a lot more productive work with that. So these are the emerging 7. Many of you are familiar with BRICS, the BRIC countries. This is really the next wave of growth that we're going to be seeing in the pharmaceutical industry. They're actually going to account for 45% of growth for the pharmaceutical industry across the board. So the growth in Western developed markets actually going to be much slower. Additionally, we are also seeing massive increase in sales in India, and China by 2020 are actually aiming to cover their entire population with basic health care. If you think about what that will do to the pharmaceutical and the biopharmaceutical industry, it'll be huge. There's also a trend which some of you may be familiar with called the sea turtles. Sea turtles are native Chinese-born Chinese who are U.S. scientists and often work in the industry for several decades in the U.S. and actually return home with government funding and create biotech, so native biotechs in China. And that is going to be a huge growth. They already have innovator molecules and innovator therapies, including stem cell therapies they're working out in China. So, this is just a quick overview of some of the aging body parts that we're looking at fixing. A lot of them have been discussed: organ replacement, regeneration, stem cell, and biologics, as well as some other SENS technologies too. So, making organs. This is sort of an interesting area right now. Actually, the founder of Organovo, which is pictured right here, will be speaking at the SENS meeting in Los Angeles next week. So Keith will be speaking. He's the CEO. For those of you that are not familiar with Organovo, they're a company based in San Diego, California, and they can now print veins. That's the beginning of creating organs for implantation in humans. And obviously the market potential of that is absolutely enormous when you start to look at, in the labs now, we currently have hearts that beat based off of stripping extracellular matrices and sort of rebuilding the hearts with cells, stem cells. And we're looking at doing that right now with other organs, so pancreas, liver, and that's something that's happening in the labs today and will be in clinical testing and possibly approved by 2020. Just some sequencing. So we have plenty of people who are involved in sequencing, including Halcyon and also Genesiant. If we're looking at the multi-gene models of disease, that's something that's going to increase in prevalence, particularly due to the gene-wide association studies that are being done and treated. We will likely be using targeted therapies as well as novel therapeutics like silencing RNA to actually silence some genes that are overexpressed or underexpressed. But these are treatments that are already in development now that are actually in clinical development as we speak. Cancer, as we know, it's very, very complex due to the number of mutations. I believe the last sequencing done of a cancer found 22,000 mutations within the cancer cells itself. But obviously we believe that there are far fewer of those and that they can be targeted through cocktail therapy. So we're going to be seeing more of a management of cancer as chronic disease rather than something that's necessarily life-threatening. So some cancers we've already had tremendous success. Prostate, if caught early, has actually an 85% relative cure rate for those that are actually caught early. So move over to biologics. I won't go into too much information on biologics other than this will be a continuing trend. Right now, antibody therapies are pretty standard. RNAi is emerging. Vaccines are here, including cancer vax. And there are a lot of rejuvenation therapies that have really caught the public interest recently with SENS, telomerase, and resveratrol as well. And this is just a quick overview of some of the trends that are going to be changing the face of the biopharmaceutical industry in 2020. So that's basically it.